In 2007, a Crash Bandicoot game was released which turned everything we knew and loved about the series on its head. It became a game that people either loved or hated, and there weren't really many opinions in between. In this video we're going to explore everything that made this game unique and get to the bottom of what made people either love or hate it. This is the big breakdown of Crash of the Titans. Over the years, there have been many Crash Bandicoot games released. The original games, as I'm sure you're aware, were developed by Naughty Dog. After the success of Crash Team Racing in 1999, Naughty Dog decided that they wanted to pursue a new creative direction and explore different game genres. This led to their contract with Universal Interactive ending, meaning they no longer had direct control over the Crash Bandicoot franchise. There were many development companies that took over and created the various Crash games that came after. Each game was created with the developer's own style, whilst also sticking with the traditional lore that made the series popular in the first place. However, between 2005 and 2008, the franchise was being developed by Radical Entertainment. That's the same Radical Entertainment who developed The Simpsons Hit and Run and Prototype 1 and 2, and they had a very different idea for their version of a Crash Bandicoot game. Crash of the Titans was their second Crash Bandicoot game, following on from Crash Tag Team Racing, and it was released worldwide in October 2007 on the PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, Nintendo Wii and the PSP. Radical Entertainment remodelled a lot of the characters for Crash of the Titans. They wanted their version to have a more distinct look from the rest of the games in the series, and they done this by giving the characters a more punk-like aesthetic. Crash himself has tattoos on his arms and can talk, albeit gibberish. Aku Aku has had a facelift, I guess. Coco hasn't really changed much, and Crunch looks sort of similar to how he did in the Wrath of Cortex. Looking at the bad guys, Dr. Neo Cortex has decided to dye his hair blue. Nina Cortex is pretty much just Nina Cortex. Uka Uka, like his brother, has undergone a serious facelift, like, wow, that's different. Engine has lost all of his colour, and Tiny Tiger now looks like an actual tiger with a hat. The character modelling isn't the only big difference in Crash of the Titans. A lot of gameplay and environmental changes were made for this game. Traditionally, levels in Crash Bandicoot are packed with TNT, Nitro, and Crash needs to collect various crystals and gems to complete levels. If he collects 100 Wumpa fruit, which is everywhere in these games, he will gain an extra life. These features have all been removed in Crash of the Titans, apart from Wumpa fruit, which is still present, but in this game it's only used to restore health, and there's nowhere near as many as you would find in any of the previous games. Instead of Wumpa fruit, Crash needs to collect this blue stuff, which is called Mojo. Mojo is used to unlock various upgrades for combat, health and sliding. A new upgrade is obtained when the player has collected enough Mojo to fill up this meter, and there are 24 upgrades in total to collect. Crash's combat has changed dramatically as well. Spinning on everything is a thing of the past. In this game, Crash attacks enemies by mostly punching and kicking them. He can still use his spin attack, but the player will need to collect enough Mojo first to unlock it. There are two types of enemies that the player will regularly encounter in this game: Minions and Titans. Minions are the smaller and easier to defeat enemies, whereas Titans, as I'm guessing you can imagine, are a lot bigger and frankly the main stars of the show. Crash can take control or jack a Titan by attacking it until its star bar is full, then jump on it and voila, the player now controls it. Up in this corner, the player can see these new bars appear when the Titan has been jacked. The green bar represents the Titan's health, and the purple bar is called the Titan meter, and it represents the charge needed for the Titan's special attack. There are 15 jackable titans in this game, and each of them have their own set of abilities and unique styles of play. There are 5 areas to explore in Crash of the Titans: Wumpa Island, Lumberyard, Sanity Island, Uka Tree, and the Doominator. These areas are broken down into 20 levels known as episodes, which all need completing. When the player completes an episode, they are rewarded with an episode idol. There are 4 types of idol in which the player can be rewarded with depending on how they play: a gold one, a silver one, a bronze one, and a standard one. Every level has 3 challenges, and the player will win one of these idols depending on how many of the challenges they complete. One challenge is to destroy the 3 spy bots hidden around the level. One is to defeat a certain number of minions, and the other challenge is to land a certain number of hits without taking damage. Completing all of these challenges earns the player a gold idol. Completing 2 of the 3 challenges earns them a silver, and so on. Now, how does this game play out? The first episode is called A New Hop, where we see Crash, Coco, Aku Aku and Crunch chilling outside their house in Wumpa Island. Soon after, Dr. Cortex turns up in a kind of metal blimp, kidnaps Coco and Aku Aku, then freezes Crunch on the spot. As Cortex is flying away, Crash throws something towards the blimp, which hits Aku Aku's cage, releasing him down below. Crash makes his way to Aku Aku whilst battling Wumpa Island's minions, Ratnicians. These guys are dressed up in lab coats and work for Dr. Cortex. Now, I know that sounds kind of obvious, but not all of the minions in this game work for Dr. Cortex. After Crash rescues Aku Aku, they see something quite frightening above them on the cliff and decide to head in its direction. They eventually come across the first Titan the player gets to control, a Spike. When being controlled, Spikes attack by swiping their huge claws upwards and charging into enemies. A Spike's special attack is called Spike Surprise, which involves raising spikes from the ground around it and damaging any enemies within its range. As the player begins episode 2, a succumbing to age story, they'll be faced with the next Titan, a Gore. Gores are a bit tougher than Spikes, so Crash uses this item called a Free Jack Mask. This allows him to stun any enemy with a single kick, making it easier to jack. Gores are slow moving titans, but what they lack in agility, they make up for in strength. They attack by swinging their horns left and right and lunging at enemies using the full force of their tusks. Their special attack is called Terrifying Roar, which paralyses any enemy within range, making them easier to defeat. A bit further along, Crash encounters the first long-range titan, a Snipe. Snipes shoot razor sharp feathers at enemies at random. If the player presses the block button, they'll enter an aim mode in which they can manually choose their targets. A Snipe's heavy attack involves rearing up, then attacking its opponents with its claws. Its special attack is called Gambler's Hand, and this involves the Snipe shooting 4 feathers at once, attacking random enemies. For episode 3, A Zero's Journey, Crash will use a mixture of the 3 titans he's already encountered. The player will need to rely on Snipe's ability to shoot these targets to open the gate up the far end. Near the end of the level, Crash and Aku Aku spot Cortex and Uka Uka stealing all of the mojo from the temple. Aku Aku believes this is related to all the strange mutants that they have been fighting. Episode 4, The Temple of Zoom, is the last episode to take place on Wumpa Island. The level is divided into 2 areas which both need to be completed in an order before the player can make their way to the boss fight. The first area involves Crash fighting a load of Ratnicians, then hitting this switch and using the Snipe to destroy the targets, opening the next area. To make his way back, Crash uses Aku Aku as an airboard for the first time and air grinds his way down the tunnel. The next area in the temple keeps with the Aku Aku grinding theme until a big jump at the end. When air grinding, Crash can collect these feathers which give him a temporary speed boost, and he can smash these boxes containing Mojo. Once complete, Crash will make his way to the top of the temple. Here the player will learn about the Titan food chain, which explains that smaller enemies are needed to jack bigger enemies. A cutscene plays and Cortex reveals that he wants to use the stolen Mojo to create a huge army of mutants. He also plans to build a huge robot doomsday device and call it the Doominator. Uka takes Coco and the stolen Mojo back to their base, leaving Crash to fight a boss called Yuctopus. Crash will need to use the other Titans in the area to work his way up to jacking the Yuctopus. To fend enemies off, it uses its tentacles to slap them away. It also plays a set of bagpipes which can temporarily paralyse enemies within its field. Its special attack is called Mojo Blast, and rather than stunning enemies, it kills them instantly on impact. The Yuctopus is used to destroy the surrounding walls, leaving Cortex nowhere to hide. After Crash and Aku Aku confront him, he flies back to his base where he's joined by Uka, Engine and Tiny. Uka explains to Cortex that he's fed up with him constantly failing and has found someone to replace him, his niece, Nina Cortex. Nina takes her uncle hostage, then attaches a device to Coco's head which forces her off camera to start building the Doominator. Episode 5, The Emerald Pity, is the first episode of the next area, Lumberyard. As the level begins, Crash will battle against the resident minions, which are called koalas. Koalas are Mojo mutated koala bears with southern fried US accents, and they work for Tiny Tiger. Crash will make his way to the giant sawmill where he'll encounter a rhino roller. Rhino rollers can be both strong and agile when attacking enemies. Its standard attack involves jabbing enemies with its horn, but what really puts this Titan in its element is when it curls up into a ball and charges, inflicting damage to anything in its path. Crash will make his way to the end of the level by jacking a rhino roller and bowling along this fast section of the level whilst avoiding these giant swords. In episode 6, Don't Eat the Yellow Brick Load, Crash encounters the first large Titan, a Shellephant. Shellephants are slow moving but very strong Titans. They attack by swinging their trunks with brute force and using what's called an infinity combo. This is when they continuously pummel the ground one fist at a time. If the player times their button pressing correctly, they can keep going for ages. Its special attack is called Blaze of Glory, which involves Shellephant blasting fire out of its trunk and damaging anything within its vicinity. Episode 7, The Blizzard of Claws, is the fiery underbelly and final episode of Lumberyard. It's home to goodness knows how many Magmadons, and these Titans can walk through lava completely unscathed. They attack by body slamming their opponents and smashing their fiery fists towards the ground. Their special attack is called the Hellfire Stomp, and it involves the Magmadon stomping the ground, causing a line of volcanic craters which deal heavy damage to anything in its way. In the final part of the level, there are these robotic spiders which need to be destroyed. Crash can do so by breaking these blue power sources. Further along, Crash will come across Tiny Tiger. Tiny breaks the fourth wall and tells Crash that he's mad at him because Crash didn't invite him to his last game. The player then battles a number of Titans until a Shellephant breaks through the gate. Crash jacks the Shellephant and chases Tiny along this very unstable pathway. When Crash catches up with Tiny, Tiny suddenly has a change of heart and now thinks Crash is awesome. He explains that Nina has replaced Dr. Cortex and taken Coco to the beach on Insanity Island. The first level that Crash plays on Insanity Island is Episode 8, Life's a Beach. The minions here are called Doom Monkeys and they wield wrenches. They have rockets stuck to their heads and work for Engine. In this level, Crash will encounter a Titan called Stench. Stench is a long-range enemy similar to Snipe, except instead of sharp feathers, Stench fires stink bombs. When an enemy is too close, Stench can slash them for heavy damage, and its special attack is called Stench Cloud, which allows it to fire multiple stink bombs at once. In episode 9, Operation Overboard, the player gets to jack the biggest and most powerful non-boss titan in the game, the Scorporilla. The Scorporilla is huge, and it makes short work of defeating anything in its way. It attacks by swinging an arm, then finishing with a 360 tail whip. Its special attack is the ground and pound, which stuns most enemies within its radius. The opponent can then be finished off with a shot from its tail. Further down the level, Crash enters a sewer and is introduced to these green and slimy titans called sludges. A sludge attacks its opponents by swinging its arms in a sort of douse him from Street Fighter kind of way, and it can do this big clap which causes heavy damage. Rather than blocking, Sludge can creep down below, then shoot up and uppercut its opponent. Its special attack is called Toxic Vom, and yeah, I don't think I need to explain this one. Episode 10 is called A Sludge Too Far, and Crash must fight his way through a load of sludges to get to the engine statue at the far end of the level. Behind the statue is an area with a Scorporilla in the middle. Crash needs to jack the Scorporilla and destroy the power units around the edges. Doing so opens a gate to episode 11, Shock and Awesome. Throughout Shock and Awesome, Engine can be heard talking to his minions over a tannoy. Crash will encounter these cold as ice titans called Ratsicles. Ratsicles are mojo mutated rats, and they attack by swiping their claws up to 3 times in succession or smashing their arms down together. Their special attack is called Freeze Punks, and it's sort of similar to Magmadon's special, except it's with ice and it doesn't stun enemies, it only freezes them. When the player reaches episode 12, Weapons of Mass Construction, they will fight many types of titans including Ratsicles, Snipes and Stenches. They will need to clear all of the enemies in one area in order to progress to the next while traversing moving platforms. Once they reach the end of the level, they will start episode 13, Doominator, which is the final level on Sanity Island. Crash begins Doominator in an area with 3 chambers. The chambers on both sides will need to be completed before he can enter the middle chamber and fight Engine. Both chambers on either side are pretty much the same. The player will need to run along this moving platform whilst avoiding the large saws and flamethrowers, then fight a load of titans and find a way of opening the exit. When Crash enters the middle chamber, he's confronted by Engine. The player doesn't actually fight Engine, instead they must fight an onslaught of Ratsicles, Sludges and Stenches, as well as Doom Monkeys, whilst trying to hit all of the targets around the arena. Engine keeps above the arena and plays his organ until the final target has been hit. When Crash and Aku Aku confront him after, he has a frankly hilarious argument with himself, then tells Crash and Aku Aku that they need to go to Uka Uka's lab because that's where all the mutants are being made. The game cuts to Nina and Uka Uka at the lab with Coco still being held prisoner. Uka Uka senses that his brother and Crash are on their way, so Nina decides to leave with Coco and orders Uka Uka to stay behind and finish the heroes off. Crash begins episode 14, Family Tree, which is the first level of the area known as Uka Tree. As he makes his way up the actual tree itself, he encounters the resident minions, Voodoo Bunnies. Voodoo Bunnies use their voodoo powers to create rain clouds which strike lightning bolts that can damage Crash if he's near one. These are the penultimate minions of the game and they work for Uka Uka. When Crash makes his way inside the tree, he'll encounter these winged titans called Battlers. Battlers use their wings to create combo attacks and slash their opponents with 3 strikes. They can swoop in to attack for extra damage, and their special attack is called a Cyclone Storm. This involves using their wings to charge a surge of wind, then release powerful cyclones which damage anything in its path. As Crash gets deeper into the Uka Tree, he'll pass through episode 15, Calamityville Horror. Here he'll battle against more Voodoo Bunnies and Battlers, as well as a few Sludges, Stenches and even a Shelephant. In episode 16, Timber Trials, there's a series of chained barriers that the player will need to smash through to get to the end. Crash will need to jack a rhino roller and use it to break the barriers so he can get through. Eventually he gets the chance to jack another Scorporilla and use it to kick all of the smaller mutants' butts and smash down the last barrier. The final level in the Uka Tree area is episode 17, Adult Edumacation. Crash will make his way past these caged mutants, then encounter the final normal non-boss titan, Electric. Electrics are long-range enemies who shoot bolts of, you guessed it, electricity at their opponents. They have a heavy short-range attack too, which allows them to fire electricity at enemies straight out of their hands. Their special attack is called Heavenly Blast, and this involves a powerful thunderbolt that attacks enemies from the sky. The player will eventually make their way to this room where they will fight Uka Uka. In order to defeat him, Crash needs to jack one of the smaller titans, then attack him until he's stunned. Once stunned, Crash can jack Uka Uka, then he'll need to use him to attack these 3 power units. Once a power unit has been destroyed, Crash will dismount Uka Uka, then rinse and repeat 2 more times and he's defeated. I really wish it was that simple, but it's not. Uka Uka is by far the toughest and most unforgiving boss in this game. His powerful optic blast can pretty much stun or kill anything in its path. Also, he can summon spikes from the ground which easily puts whatever's in its path out of action. When the player does manage to jack a titan, getting a shot on Uka Uka is made very difficult because Crash will be getting bombarded with attacks from all angles by other titans, as well as Uka Uka himself. After Uka Uka has been defeated, he tells Crash that Nina has nearly completed the Doominator. He goes on to say that once it's fully completed, Nina will most probably end Coco's life because she'll have no use for her after. The scene cuts to Coco, who's still under Nina's control and working on the Doominator. Nina explains to a tied up Dr. Cortex that the Doominator is nearly complete and she's going to use it to destroy Wumpa Island. Crash and Aku Aku have made their way onto the Doominator, and this prompts the start of the final part of the game. In episode 18, War of the Worlds, Crash will fight these megaphone wielding minions called Brat Girls. They were created by and work for Nina, and they can stun Crash by talking gibberish into their microphones. Crash will make his way through the halls of the Doominator, fighting an onslaught of Brat Girls and Ratsicles amongst other enemies along the way. He will eventually reach the Foundry in episode 19, Minority Report, which is where parts for the Doominator are being manufactured. This lava-filled inferno is home to Magmadons, Sludges, E-Electrics, and of course, lots and lots of Brat Girls. Once the player has made it through the level, a cutscene plays showing Nina explain to Coco that the Doominator is now complete. Episode 20, Revengeance 2, Revengicide, is the final level in the game. The player will jack a Scorporilla, then make their way along a series of large walkways and platforms towards Nina. At this point, even Cortex is rooting for Crash to win. Nina transfers herself into a mechanical suit of armour called Arachnina. Arachnina attacks by throwing its buzzsaw out and retracting it. Its special attack is called Robotimize, which involves the mech turning into a 6-legged version of itself and firing an intense laser beam from its eyes. To defeat Nina, Crash will need to work his way up to jacking the Arachnina, then use it to destroy the 3 spinning cogs around the room. Like the Uka Uka fight, once the first cog has been destroyed, Crash will jump off and need to work his way up again 2 more times. Once Nina has been defeated, Crash frees Coco. She then uses her Transpalumpa device to stop the Doominator, crushing poor, forgotten and frankly pointless in this game Crunch in the process. We then see the Cortex's escape, with Nina asking her uncle why he rescued her after everything she had done. He replies and tells her that betraying him is the evilest thing she could have done, and for this he's actually really proud of her. Crunch breaks free, then hugs Crash and Coco. They all decide to go inside and eat pancakes, then the game ends with Crash smiling at the camera. Now, although the story has been completed, The player will most likely have a few things left over to collect in order to truly complete the game. Each episode has a number of dolls to collect, and they're unlocked by finding them or completing challenges within the levels. The Crash doll is already there as standard on every episode screen. It displays all of Crash's up-to-date stats, including upgrade info, total mojo collected, jack info, and the game's completion percentage. These dolls are collected when Crash completes the bonus rooms in the game called Mojo Rooms. They usually involve Crash having to complete a challenge in a certain amount of time, mostly while being in control of a Titan. These dolls are found hidden within the levels, and once unlocked, the player will be able to see the concept art created by the developers for the level. Minion and Titan dolls are unlocked whenever Crash jacks or defeats a new enemy. When one is unlocked, the player can go in and view information about the mutants, and their descriptions are generally written in a humorous way. The final dolls that can be unlocked are these skin dolls. In order to unlock a mutant skin for Crash to wear, the player will need to either jack a certain number of one Titan or defeat a certain number of minions. When the player has reached the needed amounts per mutant, they can select it for Crash to wear when playing. Co-op play is a thing in Crash of the Titans, and player 2 can join the game as Carbon Crash. So, with all that said, let's get back to the original question. What is it about Crash of the Titans that makes people either love or hate this game? To start with the latter, a lot of fans within the Crash Bandicoot community hated it because the changes made by Radical Entertainment were a step too far for them. Many long-term fans found that the changes made to character design was very off-putting and unappealing. A lot of fans also felt that the game was too easy when compared to any of its predecessors, plus shifting the traditional gameplay mechanics from tricky platforming to combat focus didn't sit too well with them. On the other hand though, lots of fans really loved this game. The new gameplay mechanics which allow Crash to jack various enemies was seen as interesting, fun and innovative. Many people really enjoyed the humour within the game, particularly with cutscenes involving Engine and the conversations between minions before they spot Crash. A lot of fans really enjoyed fully exploring the levels and collecting all of the dolls and earning gold idols for all of the levels. Also, many people really enjoy playing the game with their partners, friends or family members in co-op. I think that's just about it for Crash of the Titans. Thank you so much for watching. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you want to see more big breakdowns like this. We've got many more gaming stories to explore. If you want to learn even more about Crash of the Titans, or any of the Crash games for that matter, I've left a link to the Fandom Wiki, aka the Bandipedia, in the video's description. Well worth checking out. Thanks again, hopefully see you in the next video.